This is the first session on listening. We'll turn to the Bible, see what we can find there that might help us to understand why listening is so important, indeed necessary, and how we might listen and what we might expect in the process of listening. In the book of Genesis, we are told of the creation of the world. Within that creation, human beings are created. We are creatures of God, who is the creator. That gives a specific structure to existence, in particular our existence. To be a human being is to be a creature. God, in making us, has indicated, has built into our very beings a certain purpose, a certain meaning. We don't know that as if in toto, concretely, when we begin our journey, we discover it. Life is a graced emergence, an unfolding. It is a cooperative adventure, a mutual reality, a conversation. What the Bible also talks about is a covenant. God is with us everywhere, all the time, accompanying us in this journey of graced emergence, grace discovery. On our part, it is not just an optional extra or a useful thing to listen. It is an essential thing. It is part of our coming to be human. My identity will be the result of my listening, or to put it another way, I will discover who I am through listening, through entering the mutuality of the covenant relationship. The structure of existence demands that I be a listening person. It is a way of being. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verses 4 and following, we find the beginning words of a prayer that is very precious in Judaism. It is called the Shema, from the first word. That word can be translated as listen, hear, or indeed as obey. There is a close correlation between listening and hearing on the one hand and obeying on the other, and that's built into the English language too, from the Latin word ob audire, to listen under. That's the etymology of our word for obedience. Back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, the prayer Shema, hear, O Israel, listen, pay attention. I am the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is a mnemonic. This prayer, when it is said and appropriated and gets into the bones of the one who prays, reminds them of the structure of existence, the truth, what it means to be a human being, this human being. We could understand the sin of Adam and Eve, the so-called original sin, in terms of their unwillingness to listen. God said, enjoy yourselves, partake of the fruit of the garden, but not the fruit of that tree. They didn't listen. They didn't appropriate. They didn't hear. They didn't obey. They weren't attentive to what God was saying. They disobeyed. And as we believe in our understanding of this, that is manifest in all of us. This, at times, unwillingness to listen, certainly a difficulty in listening. We have to apply ourselves to the task. And sometimes it's a very painful and uncomfortable one. The prophets constantly called the people back to hear the word of God, to listen. Hear the cry of the poor. Hear the injustice. Face it. Listen to what is being perpetrated here and return to the covenant. Get back into the conversation with God. In the Gospels, we find Jesus continuing the same prophetic tradition, encouraging people to listen. In chapter 13 of Matthew's Gospel, where he's outlining a number of the parables, listening and hearing becomes a crucial matter. We need to be listening people because that's the only way we can be thoroughly human. Oh, that today you would hear his voice. Psalm 93. Thomas Merton has a useful reflection in this regard. He writes, God speaks to us. Unlike the idols who do not speak, they have no tongue, they cannot hear. God speaks. God is in a conversation with us all the time, everywhere. Don't be afraid, I'm there. I'm with you. God speaks to us in his scriptures and has given himself to us in his Son. Our whole life of faith is a life of attentiveness, listening in order to receive the word of God into our hearts. We cannot be a person of faith unless we are a listening person. Our faith grows according to our listening, our engaging in the conversation with God. And listening, if it is real, involves hearing and submitting and facing what comes. We don't just listen, as it were, idly, out of curiosity. We listen in order to participate. Back to Merton. Faith comes from hearing. Romans chapter 10, verse 17, an absolutely crucial observation. Faith comes from hearing. It's not a question of learning a doctrine off by heart or obeying certain rules. It's a question of a journey, of a relationship that is constantly kept alive by listening and mutuality and conversation. Faith comes in this way, and it keeps coming to us, and it keeps growing, or it doesn't. We listen to God in the liturgy, in the scriptures, in meditation, in every expression of his will for us. Not by bread alone does a human being live, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. It is this listening and obedience to the word of God that restores the divine likeness in our souls and brings us the truth that makes us free. There's a story from the Desert Fathers which complements what Merton is saying. A philosopher came to Anthony in the 3rd century out in the desert and said, "You can't be happy out here. You've got no books. You cannot learn. It's a desolate place." Anthony said to the philosopher, "My book, philosopher, is the nature of created things. And whenever I wish, I can read in it the works of God." What the Desert Father is pointing to there is that the presence of God everywhere is the possibility of a conversation everywhere. And if we listen, it is the possibility of growing in faith everywhere, in all circumstances, even in the most difficult and painful places. To be open through listening to our experience is crucial to the growth of our faith. It's not just a matter of listening for what doctrine or what rule or what moral teaching. The first place where the incarnate God encounters us, and we encounter that incarnate God, Jesus, who said, "I'll be with you until the end of time." We encounter the incarnate God in the incarnate reality. Concretely, that is my experience. I'm going to conclude with a brief reflection by a Benedictine nun from the United Kingdom, Sister Maria Boulding. She writes, "Like Jesus, you have to listen and listen. It will take you all your life to hear the Father's word of love for you. Indeed, it will take you all your eternity."